So here we are back again with the church guy and the addict. I'm Don and I'm the church guy.
And I'm Danny, and I'm the addict. Welcome.
Hey Danny, how are you doing today, buddy?
Good, Don. How are you, my friend?
Good. Thanks for dropping over with your new bike there last night. That was pretty awesome.
Oh, thank you, thank you. That's
Well, tell us
that's
about,
my
can you tell us about the bike?
yeah. It's a ST 1300, a Honda, and best bike I've ever owned. And I'm just so grateful I got it. It's about 2 weeks now that I have it, and for me, that's my drugs today is getting out there and riding. And so it's appropriately named Serenity is the name of my bike.
You named it Serenity. And what was your last bike's name?
Gigi, God's gift.
Nice. So
Yeah.
Serenity is better than God's gift?
100 times.
Better
100 times.
bike. Well, looks
Moving
like
on up.
hey?
Moving on up.
It looks like a sweet ride. Yeah, it was really nice. Well, really good condition, eh?
Beautiful,
Beautiful
yes.
bike, yeah.
Blessed.
So Danny, last week we talked about, or in the last video, we talked about ground rules,
Right.
remember? And then you weren't that crazy about the about calling them ground rules, and at the end you came up with the line ground guidelines,
Right.
which we kind of thought was better.
Right.
And I agree with you. I think guidelines is a better way of putting it. But I just wanted to go a little bit deeper with that today, and thought we could discuss this whole idea of if you have somebody that's in recovery that moves in with you,
Right.
okay, and you know that I did that. Monica and I did that a few years ago, and I know you've had people in recovery move in with you. You had
Right.
somebody live with you for a month, I think, right?
Right. Yeah, my cousin.
Yeah. So that's sort of a different topic than sort of guidelines in a relationship or ground
Right.
rules in a relationship. And I was thinking it's probably more important to have guidelines when somebody's living with you. I remember when we had a young man living with us and he was struggling with his addictions, we did a contract. Have you ever done that with anybody, or do you recommend that, or what do you think of that? So
Um,
we did a contract where we said, you know, zero tolerance. This is what happens if you do this. This is what we expect. The behavior that we expect in our home. You know, if you're having people in, we expect you to ask permission. I mean, this person was 17 years old, so it's a little different than having an adult living with you. But we had
right.
guidelines, and I just wondered from a church guy's point of view, um, you know, we probably see that as a real asset to the relationship. It gives us sort of guidelines too, what to expect, what we're going to provide. Is there a cost for room and board? You know,
Hmm.
is any, you know, are you out after the first time you use, or are you gone, or is there any tolerance? So I'm just wondering what your opinion is about that.
Well, today because they have so many treatment centers, I
Right.
would recommend treatment. Like go to a treatment center
Okay.
personally. In the case of myself with my cousin, he had been to numerous treatment centers. I can't tell you how many he's been to, but it's been more than 10, I would guess at. So he knew what he had to do. And once again, you talked about a contract, and when he came into my home, I literally strip searched him and his belongings, and
Um,
he was like, "Danny, you're joking, right?" And I said, "No, because when you're entering my home, um, I might be susceptible to whatever I might find on him, A, and B, if you're an addict of my nature, you got stuff stashed. At least I did. I would go to treatment centers with stuff stashed,
right.
and so I would have these quote unquote hamburger helpers as I was trying to struggle to stay not shaky and vomity and what have you. You know what I mean? I needed to have supplements, if you will, to get well, because let's face it, when you're an addict, whether you're in jail or in someone's home or in a treatment center or whatever, your goal is to get high
Yeah.
or to drink. That's your whole breath of life, if you will. You know, that's what kept me breathing is to use, you know, and you know, I over time I've discovered that a lot of times it's not so much the using, it's more of the getting away with doing something bad, if you will. When I
Mm.
say, you know, it's getting away with something else, and it was very hard for myself when I was in recovery to not do something bad. So here I am in this historic home, and I'm in recovery with 18 other men, and I needed to do something bad every day, but I didn't want to drink or drug. So what I used to do is I used to smoke in the facility, and if you got caught smoking in the facility, they'd kick you out.
Mm.
Needed to do something bad, if that makes any sense.
So, in other words, you were looking to break the rules.
I had to because, you know, for so many years you were breaking all kinds of rules, if you
Yeah.
will. And so for myself personally, I needed to do something bad. So having that cigarette was my way of doing something bad, if you will, that I got away. It's the rush of getting away with it. Like you hear it a lot of times with people who are thieves. It's not what they steal. It's the act of getting away with it.
So,
That's the rush.
do you think you were really getting away with it, or do you think the counselors there actually knew what was going on, but they didn't want to, send you home for that?
Well, I don't think they knew. I don't
No,
think they, no, no, because I would have been caught. And there's zero tolerance for it because it's an historic home,
right.
you know.
So you would have
So,
been sent home.
well, there wasn't a home to be sent to,
No, so you
but
would
yeah,
have been kicked out
I would have got tossed. Yes.
back on the streets. So,
Yeah.
Daddy, that's interesting. So you say that. So the person that we brought into our home and your cousin that you brought into your home, or people that are going into treatment centers, are usually have some kind of drug on them when they go in.
Yes. I would say they do.
So, so you did a strip search. I didn't do that, but within a couple of days of the person living with me, they were caught drinking in our home, and we gave them some grace. We gave him some grace, and well, actually, I took him over to your house, and you had a chat with him. We did a sort of an intervention with him, I guess, and that was only a few days after he had been here.
Right.
But he wasn't obviously ready to really get clean. He probably just needed a place to live more than anything.
Right.
Why do you think? Why do you think people are going into detox or going into a treatment center with drugs? If I mean, you'd think that if they're at the end of the road, they want to get clean and sober, that they would just do everything they're required. What is that? That like, why would they even agree to go if they're not ready to give it up? So they go in with the drugs. They're risking losing the opportunity. So usually hard to get into those places, or somewhere you're waiting to get in.
Right. Right.
What is it about addiction that people will do that?
Well, that's the nature of the disease, you know, Don. If you think of your worst flu, okay, and think of how sick you are, and then you could take fill in the blank, whatever, to feel better, and your
Yeah,
flu is gone almost instantly. Do you know what I mean? Because there's a lot. Withdrawal is a horrible thing, you know, and so unless you're in it and understand how horrible it is, you can't really grasp it. And so, well, that's why I use the analogy of the flu. So if you had this worse flu and I could give you this pill or whatever, fill in the blank, and all of a sudden you're feeling normal again and you're feeling good and oh my God, that just about killed me this morning. You know
mm,
what I mean? And it ached, like everything aches when you're in withdrawal. So it's your way of coping, if you will. It's your breath. Like if you can't breathe and I'm letting you breathe, for instance, I'm standing on your chest and this pill will let you breathe, and that's the equivalent of me getting off your chest.
right.
It just makes sense be able to breathe or to be able to function and stop being shaky and stop being vomity and stop being full of diarrhea. And, like it's a very horrible thing, withdrawal, and I think a lot of people don't quite understand how awful withdrawal truly is, but once again, I truly discourage bringing people into your home because it's very hard on your family,
Yeah.
especially, like with myself, for instance, Bernadette was uh, accommodating and she was happy to help. But once again, there was no focus on her really. It was
Mm,
my focus more on my cousin. And I had a job where I was able to bring him to work with me.
mm,
So I would watch him 24/7, and just simple things like having a shopping list. You know, what are the things you need? Okay, write them down. And he'd write them down and he'd be back in 5 minutes. Here you go. And for instance, I don't drink milk, and Bernadette drinks a certain kind of milk. So he wouldn't have that on the list. And I'd say, well, I think you want to relook that over because you're the only one who drinks milk in this house. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And so anyway, and just simple things like my cousin is a wealthy man, we'll put it that way. And so for instance, he would shop on his way to work to buy buns and cold cuts and da, 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 and you fill in the blank for his days of meal at work, let's say. And in my house, it's like almost like we lived in the cottage, so we made a list of supplies, if you will, because I go to the grocery store once a week.
mm.
I don't go every day because I find that a waste of time. Get what you need and you go back the following week. But it was funny because, for instance, he wanted chips, which is no problem, but it wasn't on his list because we always had a movie night on Fridays. It was our little, we made it through the week of work, not time to kick back. And Friday nights we had movies on TV, and so we would rent movies at Blockbuster. This is before Netflix. And anyway, long story short, we'd come home and he'd say, "My God, the chips, they're gone." And because it wasn't on his list, and I was trying to teach him to be I don't know the right word, but you buy whatever's on the list. And because he didn't have chips on the list, I would leave it in the box.
You're teaching him discipline, I guess, is what it sounds like.
Exactly, exactly. And even times where I would be at work and there'd be a noon meeting, um, I would introduce him to people in the community. And it was up to him, to not only have someone to get him, and he'd say, "Danny, I'm a grown man. I could walk across the green to go to that church over there."
Yeah.
And I'd say, "No, no, no. You can't even come home after work, or you can't even show up to work. And you expect me to trust you to cross this?" No. So he had to find someone to bring him to the meeting and bring him back home. And B, he would have to, I would give him money to put in the basket, like church, to
Yeah.
donate. And if he forgot the money at home, then I wouldn't give him no money and he'd have to go to the meeting. And he'd say, "But Dan, I feel bad. I got no money." And I'd say, "Then tomorrow you'll remember to put it in your pocket." So just teaching them little things like that was huge. And, like, and even something else is like the price of fuel, because I remember one day the fuel was real cheap. And I was like telling the secretary at work going, "Oh, you got to get gas because it's X amount, whatever it was." And he's like, "What's the big fuss?" And he never, ever looked at the price of fuel because he had a lot of money, right? So whatever it was, didn't matter. He never looked. And so just teaching him basic economic things, and, he'd be stymied how little money that Bernadette and I made, but we were able to pay our mortgage and have food in the house and have nice furniture.
Mm.
But everything was kind of budgeted. Do you know what I mean? Whereas my cousin had no budget ever. He could walk into a store and it was amazing to be around him because he could drop $1,500 so easily on this, that, the other, and walk out. And it was no big deal for him. But for you and I, and he's doing this daily, you and I would be like, "Oh my God."
So, Danny, do you
Like,
think budgeting is a big thing for for people with addictions? Like, is that an important
I
part of
I
that?
think because people with addictions have no budget sense, if you will. You
Hmm,
know, they have $500, boom, they'll spend it in an hour.
yeah,
You know, and that's, you know, I think we touched on it on one of the previous episodes, but I used to give all my money to my sponsor
yeah,
because I was no good with money. And I had to actually, in my church, they had budgeting like techniques, and
oh yeah,
like don't buy what's at eye level because that's more expensive. Look down lower, and you'll get like a no name brand, let's say, of the same stuff, which is half the price.
hmm,
Stuff like that,
yeah,
or be it chips or soda, whatever. You buy the no name chips, it's 99 cents a bag. You buy the Dorito ones, they're 3.50 or whatever. Like, just things like that, that I had no clue about
yeah,
because I was never worried about, well, of course you worry about money when you're actively using, but you're not budgeting. You're not worried about tomorrow. You're living for the moment, you
right.
know?
Well, so I think in conclusion for today, I mean, the question was, should we have people in our homes? You
No.
say no.
There's so many facilities today
Yeah,
that treatment wise, and OHIP will pay for it for those who are Canadian.
but I know it's pretty common. I just read a book on the Razor's Edge, which was my friend that was murdered in Kamloops in March, and he was taken into somebody's home in Huntsville, Ontario. So this was a doctor's home he went into. Now maybe there was different circumstances. It was successful for a while, but then in the end, obviously, it didn't work. He was, back using again, drinking after he spent a year and a half with them. But there was lots of struggles in that relationship too, I think. And I mean, if you, as an addict yourself, brought somebody into your home, and was it successful? Did your brother or your cousin get clean, or what happened to him?
He remained clean while he was here.
Yeah,
I suggested he stay longer,
right.
but he owns his own business, and he kept talking about, oh, I got to go back for the business, and right away he lied, because his wife wanted to come pick him up uh, eventually when it was time to go home. And I remember I was racing that time, and he said to her, "You got to come now before Danny leaves to go racing, because there's no way I can lock the place up," which was a lie,
Mm,
because you got to do is hit the garage door opener as you're exiting the garage, and you can lock it up.
right.
And so right then I caught him in a lie, and I said, "I highly recommend that you stay longer because you're already lying." I didn't use the word lying. I used BS.
Right.
but but you gotta, and that's what we talked about, guidelines and rules. Everybody's different. Yes, I understand that. But you see, like, I remember we would drive home from work, for instance, and he would cry because Bernadette would be home cooking for us our dinner. And that was the other thing. He was part of the family, meaning he had chores. There was nights he had to cook or do the dishes. Like, everybody had a job in this house. It
Yeah.
wasn't he was a guest and he didn't have to do anything. He just lied back and did nothing. No. Um, he was very sick when he first came. So when
Mm,
I brought him to work, he basically just lied on the couch getting sick uh,
mm,
pretty much all day long. But eventually, as time went on, he was part of my job. I had him do things to keep him healthy and working and whatever, so he felt a
right.
part of. So it wasn't a free ride. But my point is this: he would weep on the way home to my house and say, "Oh, how lucky I was to have him um, be part of my household."
Mm,
And I would say to him, "Your wife's home. You chose not to go home. You did that day in and day out. You chose not to be the family man, to sit down and have dinner with your wife and your son. and whomever.
Mm.
You chose, so it's a matter of taking responsibility, if you will.
So he appreciated the stability of your home, but he couldn't do it in his own home.
No, no. And that's the thing that a lot of people in treatment will call it a fence. They live in this fence, and a lot of people in jail, they live in this fence and they live by certain rules,
Yeah.
but they have no clue how to live outside on the street because they're looking at life doing what they want to do would be the right word,
Yeah.
rather than what the program, like, see, long story short, when I was in treatment, I got up and we did devotions.
Right.
We ate at a certain time every day.
Right.
And I try to stick to that today. And I do stick to that even when I travel. First thing I do is I do my devotions.
Well, let's talk about that on the next video then, because we're out of time now. But that's I like that. I think that's a big question too. Is how much routine do we have in our lives that keeps us from, well, for addicts to keeps them from using. But so let's talk about that next time.
Okay.
So Danny, if people have questions that they want to ask either the addict or the church guy, they can send their questions to the church guy and the addict at gmail.com, and we'd be happy to answer those questions. So until next time, great seeing you, Danny.
Good
Behave
seeing you
yourself.
too. And just remember, we'd love to hear from y'all. So that sounded very American, y'all. All of you. So
Thanks,
please
Danny.
send in questions or comments. Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks, Danny. See ya.